Bizarre royal deaths. Frederick Barbarossa was born in 1122 into one of the most powerful families of the time. His father, Frederick II, was the Duke of Swabia from the mighty Hohenstaufen dynasty, while his mother, Judith of Bavaria, came from the influential Welf family. This unique lineage placed Frederick in a rare and enviable position, a natural diplomat in a medieval world rife with family feuds. With ties to both the rival Hohenstaufen and Welf factions, he was perfectly positioned to act as a bridge between the warring parties. But Frederick wasn't just a privileged child born with a silver sword in his hand. No, from a young age, he demonstrated remarkable leadership skills, undeniable charisma, and a sharp strategic mind. These qualities quickly set him apart, making him the strongest contender for the royal throne. In 1152, after the death of his uncle, Conrad III, Frederick was elected King of Germany. By 1155, he was officially crowned Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Adrian IV. At just 33 years old, Frederick had a grand vision to restore the power and prestige of the Holy Roman Empire and unify its fragmented territories. Frederick wasted no time getting to work. He proved himself a man of action. He wasn't one to sit back polishing his crown while nobles squabbled. Oh no, brought the fight to them. His reign focused on one thing: consolidating imperial power in Germany, restoring order to his empire, and making sure everyone knew exactly who was in charge.
The Emperor!
12th century Germany was a chaotic patchwork of tiny kingdoms, each ruled by powerful nobles who weren't exactly thrilled about taking orders from an emperor. But Frederick? Oh, he changed that. With sharp diplomacy, relentless military campaigns, and when needed, brutal displays of sheer force. He tightened his grip on the empire and cut down the power of any lord who dared oppose him. If Germany kept Frederick busy, then Italy was where things got truly chaotic. The wealthy cities of northern Italy, especially Milan, weren't exactly thrilled about taking orders from an emperor. In 1158, Frederick launched a series of campaigns into northern Italy to assert his authority. He made one thing very clear: rebellion was not an option. In 1162, he brutally sacked Milan after a prolonged siege, believing it would send a strong message. And it did send a message, just not the one Frederick had hoped for. In response, the Italian cities united to form the Lombard League, a determined alliance against Frederick's rule. The conflict reached its climax in 1176 at the Battle of Legnano, where the Lombard League handed Frederick a rare and humiliating defeat. Forced to negotiate peace, Frederick was left with no choice but to scale back his ambitions in Italy. As if dealing with the Italian city-states wasn't enough, Frederick found himself needing to pay even more attention to the Pope. Like many medieval emperors, he believed that the emperor should have authority over the Pope. Oh, but the Pope didn't quite see it that way. And so, the two began giving each other a lot more attention. Frederick's struggle with Pope Alexander III over power in Italy dragged on for years. It eventually ended in a reluctant peace, where Frederick was forced to recognize Alexander as the legitimate pope. By 1189, Frederick was in his late 60s. That's a remarkable age for a medieval emperor, but retirement and basket weaving were definitely not on his agenda. Instead, he joined the Third Crusade, teaming up with heavyweights like Richard the Lionheart of England and Philip II of France to reclaim Jerusalem from Saladin. Frederick's army was one of the largest ever assembled for a crusade, with tens of thousands of soldiers. Marching through Europe and into Asia Minor, Barbarossa seemed unstoppable. And here, dear listener, is where our story takes a tragic and bizarre turn. On the 10th of June, 1190, Frederick's army reached the Salif River, now known as the Göksu River in Turkey. Accounts vary, but here's the essence of what happened. Advisors urged him to find a bridge to cross the swift waters, but Frederick believed the river could be crossed on horseback. Determined to prove himself right, the king was the first to enter the river. However, his horse could not withstand the strong current, and Frederick, wearing heavy armor, was unable to swim. In the end, both the man and the horse drowned. The aftermath was chaos. Without their leader, many of Frederick's troops abandoned the crusade and returned home. Despite his setbacks in Italy and his sudden death, Frederick I, Barbarossa, is remembered as one of the greatest rulers of the medieval era. Charles VIII, also known as Charles the Affable, was born in 1470. He ascended to the throne at the tender age of 13. And when I say ascended to the throne, what I really mean is that his sister Anne and her husband, the Duke of Bourbon, essentially ran the country as regents for half of his reign. Charles? He was more of a figurehead during those early years, doing what teenagers do best. Not much.
Huh?
Though his reign was relatively uneventful, it wasn't entirely without drama.
Drama!
You see, Charles had this grand dream of reclaiming the Kingdom of Naples because, well, why Naples, you ask? Medieval kings had a thing for complicated family trees, and technically, Charles had a claim to it through some tangled web of inheritance. Naturally, he thought, why not give it a shot? In 1494, he launched an invasion of Italy with one of the most advanced armies of the time, complete with cutting-edge artillery. At first, it seemed like he might actually pull it off. He even captured Naples with barely a fight. But if you think this was his happily ever after moment, think again. Charles might have been great at conquering Naples, but holding on to it, not so much. The rest of Europe wasn't exactly thrilled about his Mediterranean escapade. Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and several Italian states formed an anti-French coalition known as the League of Venice. And their one demand? Charles VIII, get out of here! Under pressure, Charles was forced to pack up and head home. Now, let's not forget his personal life. It was just as chaotic as his military campaigns. In 1491, Charles married Anne of Brittany. This was a major political win, as it brought Brittany under French control. Great for France, not so great for their family tree. Tragically, all their children died young, leaving Charles without an heir. Fast forward to his strange and untimely death in 1498. One fine day, Charles was attending a jeu de paume match, an early form of tennis, at Chateau d'Amboise. Of course, kings didn't play tennis, they watched. As he left the match around 2 p.m., Charles struck his head on a low doorframe. At first, it seemed like no big deal, but hours later, he fell into a coma and died 9 hours after the incident. Yes, you read that correctly. Charles VIII, the ambitious king who marched into Italy with dreams of conquest, died from hitting his head on a doorway. Charles left behind a rather underwhelming legacy, a France in debt and turmoil thanks to his lofty ambitions. With no heir to succeed him, the throne passed to his cousin, Louis XII. James II sat on the throne of Scotland for a solid 23 years, from 1437 to 1460. Oh, he also had quite a memorable nickname, Fiery Face, thanks to a striking crimson birthmark that adorned his face.
Is it beautiful?
As it turns out, James was actually one half of a pair. He had a twin brother named Alexander. Sadly, Alexander died young. At just 6 years old, James's life took a dramatic turn when his father, King James I, was assassinated in 1437. Now, you are the king. Young James II ascended the throne, becoming the first Scottish king not crowned at Scone. Instead, his coronation took place at Holyrood Abbey in March 1437. Oh, and let's not forget, he was still just a kid. Real power remained in the hands of nobles and regents until James could, actually rule. For the most part, James II is remembered as a fairly decent ruler. He achieved some remarkable things, like founding the University of Glasgow, which earned him plenty of brownie points in history. But he was also responsible for some truly reprehensible actions, such as the assassination of the Earl of Douglas. That's right, James wasn't exactly a live and let live kind of guy. If someone looked like they might threaten his power, they didn't stick around for long. In 1452, James II invited William Douglas, the 8th Earl of Douglas, to Stirling Castle for negotiations. However, things took a gruesome turn. During an argument, James flew into a rage and stabbed Douglas 26 times. His court officials joined in the bloodbath. One allegedly used an axe to crush the Earl's skull. They then unceremoniously tossed William Douglas's body out the window. After this bloody event, James launched a campaign against the Douglas family, seizing their lands and wealth to strengthen the crown's power. By the 15th century, Scotland's wars of independence were over, but that didn't mean everything was peachy. Near the border, several territories, including Roxburgh Castle, were still under English control. James decided it was time to reclaim this piece of real estate, especially with England distracted by its own drama, the Wars of the Roses. Seemed like a good idea at the time, right? Spoiler alert, it wasn't! During the siege of Roxburgh Castle, James's bold plan backfired. Literally, he was killed by a cannon. And before you say, well, that's not such a strange way to die, cannons are designed to kill people. Here's the kicker. It was one of his own cannons. You see, James was a huge fan of artillery, so much so that he imported several cannons all the way from Flanders. Naturally, he wanted a front row seat to watch his prized toys in action. But, as fate would have it, one of these fancy cannons decided to act up. Instead of firing at the enemy, it exploded. And unfortunately for James, he was standing a little too close. The aftermath was chaotic. As King James II stood near one of his cannons, it unexpectedly exploded due to a malfunction. A shard of metal struck his thigh with such force that it shattered the bone, throwing him to the ground and killing him almost instantly. Although King James II met a rather explosive end, the Scottish army pressed on, and just days later, Roxburgh Castle surrendered and was captured. Frederick was the son of George II and the father of George III. Both his father and his son ruled England as kings. But Frederick? Well, he never got the chance. He died before his father. A cruel twist of fate, though honestly, it likely didn't bother George II or Queen Caroline in the slightest. They utterly despised him. And Frederick? The feeling was mutual. But let's rewind and start at the beginning where it all began. Prince Frederick Louis was born on the 31st of January 1707 in Hanover, Holy Roman Empire. Frederick entered the world as the heir to a rising dynasty. His father, George, the Elector of Hanover, would later become King George II of Great Britain. His mother, Caroline of Ansbach, was a highly respected consort. At the time of Frederick's birth, the family had not yet ruled England. Their claim to the throne was only solidified in 1714 when his grandfather, George I, ascended the throne thanks to the Act of Settlement passed in 1701. When the family moved to England in 1714, Frederick stayed behind in Hanover to finish his education. He was left in the care of his uncle, Ernest Augustus, the Prince Bishop of Osnabrück, and wouldn't reunite with his parents for another 14 years. Frederick eventually joined his family in England in 1728 after his father ascended the throne as George II. That same year, he was granted the title Prince of Wales, cementing his position as the heir apparent. But if anyone thought this would bring the family closer together, they were sorely mistaken. Frederick's relationship with his parents was a disaster from the start. George II and Caroline saw their eldest son as reckless, irresponsible, and a thorn in the side of the royal family. To them, he was nothing short of a constant headache, a source of endless frustration every time he crossed their minds. It's even said that Queen Caroline, on her deathbed, remarked about him, "At least I shall have one consolation when I close my eyes forever. I shall never have to see that monster again." For his part, Frederick wasn't much better. He frequently aligned himself with political factions that opposed his father and challenged his father's authority whenever he got the chance. One of the most infamous incidents happened in 1737 when Frederick's wife, Augusta, was about to give birth. Instead of allowing the royal family to witness the event, as royal protocol required, Frederick secretly took her from Hampton Court to London in the middle of the night. This outrageous stunt infuriated both George II and Queen Caroline, deepening the rift in an already fractured royal family. Despite a tumultuous family life, Frederick was a devoted husband to Augusta of Saxe-Gotha, whom he married in 1736. The couple had 9 children, including George III, who would go on to become one of England's most iconic monarchs. Frederick was also a man of culture, with a deep appreciation for music, art, and literature. Being excluded from national politics gave him plenty of time to indulge his passions, including sports. Notably, he was an avid fan of cricket. Though, ironically, this may have contributed to his downfall. A keen games player, he was struck hard by a ball while playing cricket. The blow apparently caused an abscess. Sometime later, while walking in his garden at Kew on a cold March day, the prince caught a chill, which eventually turned into pleurisy. He returned to Leicester House in Leicester Square, where 3 doctors were summoned to bleed him. At first, his condition seemed to improve, but then the abscess ruptured, or so it seemed. By the evening of the 20th, bedridden and in worsening health, he began to cough violently. Placing his hand on his abdomen, he whispered, "Je sens la mort. I feel death." His German servant, who was holding him at the time, felt him shudder and cried out, "The prince is going!" Frederick's wife, stationed at the foot of the bed, grabbed a candle and rushed to his side. But by then, he was already gone. An autopsy later concluded that Frederick had died of asphyxiation caused by the ruptured abscess, though at the time, most people believed pneumonia was the ultimate cause of death. Frederick died in 1751 at the age of 44. That was 9 years before the death of his father.